How do you spell corrupt as hell? G-O-P, G-O-P. How do you spell corrupt as hell? G-O-P, G-O-P. How do you spell corrupt as hell? Don't ask Trump, 'cause he can't spell. How do you spell corrupt as hell? G-O-P. How do you spell screw the poor? G-O-P, G-O-P. How do you spell screw the poor? That's G-O-P. How do you spell screw the poor? They've got enough, the rich need more. How do you spell screw the poor? G-O-P.
How do you spell vote suppression?
G-O-P, G-O-P.
How do you spell
Vote suppression, G-O-P.
How do you spell vote suppression? Yeah, that's how they steal elections.
How do you spell vote suppression, G-O-P? How do you spell NRA?
G-O-P,
G-O-P. How do you spell NRA? G-O-P. How do you spell NRA? Another mass shooting every day. How do you spell NRA? G-O-P.
That's your part, the 3 letters, if you haven't picked it up yet. How do you spell KKK?
G-O-P, G-O-P.
How do you spell
KKK, G-O-P.
How do you spell KKK? What would old Abe Lincoln say?
How do you spell KKK, G-O-P? How do you spell fossil fuels? G-O-P, G-O-P. How do you spell fossil fuels?
That's
G-O-P. How do you spell fossil fuels? Global warming, that's fake news. How do you spell fossil fuels? G-O-P.
How do you spell corporate greed?
G-O-P, G-O-P.
How do you spell
Corporate greed, G-O-P. How do you spell
corporate greed? They'll steal it all from you and me.
How do you spell corporate greed? G-O-P. How do you spell traitors and treason? G-O-P, G-O-P. How do you spell traitors and treason? G-O-P. How do you spell traitors and treason? It's beyond all rhyme and reason. How do you spell traitors and treason? G-O-P.
How do you spell women in chains?
G-O-P, G-O-P.
How do you spell
Women in chains, G-O-P.
How do you spell women in chains? Abortion rights go down the drain.
How do you spell women in chains? G-O-P. How do you spell the big lie? G-O-P, G-O-P. How do you spell the big lie? G-O-P. How do you spell the big lie? Is this the way democracy dies? How do you spell G-O-P? Got a little tongue-tied there.
How do you spell gerrymander?
G-O-P, G-O-p.
How do you spell gerrymander? G-O-P. How do you spell gerrymander? Rigged elections, what they planned for.
How do you spell gerrymander? G-O-P.
Stretch on that rhyme.
How do you spell Taliban? G-O-P, G-O-P. How do you spell Taliban? That's G-O-P. How do you spell Taliban? Here come Proud Boys, gun in hand. How do you spell Taliban? G-O-P.
How do you spell fascist scum?
G-O-P, G-O-P.
How does one spell fascist scum? It's
That's G-O-P. How do you spell fascist scum?
Scratch a Republican, you'll get one.
How do you spell fascist scum? G-O-P. How do you spell teaching lies? G-O-P, G-O-P. How do you spell teaching lies? G-O-P. How do you spell teaching lies? Whitewash history, no surprise. How do you spell teaching lies? G-O-P.
How do you spell what's that smell?
G-O-P, G-O-P. How do you spell what's that smell? G-O-P. How do you spell? What's that smell? Worse than a skunk. Truth to tell. How do you spell? What's that smell? G-O-P. How do you spell corrupt as hell? G-O-P, G-O-P. How do you spell corrupt as hell? G-O-P. How do you spell corrupt as hell? Don't ask Trump, cause he can't spell. How do you spell corrupt as hell? G-O-P. Thank you.
I hope this wasn't advertised as a nonpartisan event.